So thank you for taking time today. Let's get started with your introduction.
Sure. I'm Pranshu. I come from India. I've been working with communities for about 6 years now. It's been thrilling to realize that it's 6 years now, and the number just goes on and on and on. When I started with communities, I never thought that I would work with communities. I would end up working with communities. But yeah, it's been fun. Right now, I'm working at Unleash as the open source community manager.
That's great. The community term is like very broad and like it varies
Yeah.
from people to people. Like, for example, I was speaking with one of my internal colleagues that they think the community manager is only managing Slack or a Discord, answering questions. Or
hmm
if you talk to someone else, you might get a different answer.
Yeah.
What's a community or a community management from your point of view?
I mean, it's a very generalist role, right? You can just look at Slack or Discord or your forums, right? That's fine as well. But for me, I work with startups, with early stage startups. So it's a much more nuanced role where a community manager comes in, goes through your Slack, your Discord, your forums, of course, but also goes for social media, right? Because again, it's a startup. You don't have the resources to hire a social media manager, but these are the things that's expected of a community manager. More so, you also go for events, right? Hackathons, conferences, meetups, and you also collect a lot of feedback around the product because you are the ones in touch with your users directly, right? So a big chunk of my job is having these one-on-one conversations, right? And those conversations might happen on those forums. Sure, you're managing the forums, but you're not managing a huge crowd. You're managing expectations of a single users. That's what community means, right? When we think about marketing in the same perspective, it's reaching to a broader audience, right? Marketing is for, you're sort of shouting in the dark and see what comes back, but community is when you have those set of users, you've activated them, you've acquired them, right? And they're somewhere inside the funnel. How do you help them reach towards the end of it, right? And whether it's through revenue you're supporting it, whether it's through product feedback, whether it's through external marketing, the organic marketing. So this is a huge part of community management where you get to referrals, right? Where you understand the product, where you make sure that they're being heard, and once the user is impressed, once the community member is impressed, they often go and talk about it in public, right? And nothing can beat the growth you get through organic referrals, right? In our day to day as well, we come across so much content, right? So many platforms. I mean, I'm sure you or anybody in your audience must have recommended something, a song, a podcast, an artist, an application, a product, maybe even, the laptop they're using. Right. So they're part of these little communities. Maybe they don't know of it yet. Maybe they don't interact with it yet, but they are impressed so far as to refer, a product directly to somebody else. So again, a huge part. And doing this for any early stage startup, it's even difficult because they're still looking for visibility, So it's crucial if you get those referrals. It's crucial if you have those ambassadors, those champions who go out and help others set up their own, say, Unleash instance for in my case. Right. Yeah, it's a lot more than just managing Slack and Discord for sure.
Yeah, I think I think you put it in a really nice way. So it's more like you bridge the connection between your target users and the company, where you provide a lot of valuable things like product feedback and like you talked about organic marketing, like the community member
hmm
can talk about, write a blog post or I talk about in a conference where
Exactly.
you don't need to kind of pay, or you don't need to kind of ask them, but they're doing on behalf of you. So
Yeah.
that's more powerful than you go on talking about your product. If somebody is talking about your
Exactly.
product, that kind of creates a
Exactly.
word of mouth, like where you
hmm
can trust the person. So there's going to be a huge advantage with this community. That's a huge advantage the community brings. How do you
That's
kind of
true.
Yeah,
That's
please.
true. And adding on top of it, like when we're talking about developer tooling, right? Because we are in a developer space. I've always been a technical community manager, so to speak, or developer community manager. Even in the developer space, it's more difficult to find trust because developers aren't your regular users. They are highly skilled, very knowledgeable and opinionated users. You cannot just show them a demo and change their minds. They will go back and try it out themselves, right? And to even reach that part where they try out your product, right? It's a huge journey because developers don't work that way, right? I'm not there to change their mind, of course. I'm there to show them, okay, this is what the product can do. Would you be willing to try it out, right? Would you be willing to have a discourse about it? Would you be willing to tell me that I'm wrong? Because it's important for them to tell me that I'm wrong, right? And where am I wrong?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this is something that we come across time and time and time again. And ads work. I'm not saying that advertisements don't work at all, but the ratio is too less to sort of get any sort of feedback. I see a lot of ads, even in my regular day. I come across so many advertisements for developer tooling because if I'm managing a developer community, I often Google stuff or solve doubts. So I'm the target too. But at the same time, when I see those ads, I'm like, like I understand your product, but it's not for me. But
Mm-hmm.
until and unless those people from those companies would come and talk to me that and say that, you know what, this is why we're better, I'll be like, oh, now that makes sense. Why aren't why aren't you putting that in your messaging?
Mm-hmm.
So again, like this is the one-on-one aspect of it, right, which is very important, and especially for developers, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, I agree on that. And you also brought up a very important topic that you don't need to chase your leads or a potential prospects. They're already in
Yeah.
your funnel. They're
Hmm.
already in your funnel. It's your
Yeah.
chance to nurture them, bring
Yeah.
value to them, help them to
Yeah.
solve their problem. They
Yeah.
might be future customer, but they may not
Yeah.
be, but you're
Yeah.
helping them to solve. So they're going to be
Exactly.
recommending, or and also they're going to be giving you feedback, like just like you said about, hey, I didn't know about this, I couldn't find out that, so maybe we can
Hmm.
update the messaging, or maybe we can update our web page according to that, so we can
Hmm.
optimize our marketing
Yeah.
efforts based on
Yeah.
the constant feedback from the community. uh,
Hmm.
that's great. And coming to the business point of view, like why somebody should start, like how somebody can start a community, like yes, I see the value, I see what is going on. How can somebody can a mid-size or a startup who got a good serious funding,
Hmm.
why they should care about community? I see the value, but how can I start? So there are two questions.
Right. So how can I start? Of course, it's a difficult question to answer because when you're trying to find your feet in the industry, you're not thinking of the community usually, right? You're trying to focus on the product. In any early stage startup, I like to call it a product fun land. I've had enough experience to realize, okay, this is the product. We need more product people. We need more engineers. Let's focus on this. So it's difficult to focus on community in the first place, but there are often early adopters, right, who find your product really cool, right? They have shown indications that, okay, we really like your product. How can we contribute? I suggest you start there. You sort of put them together someplace, in your product, on Twitter as well. Like, it's fine. Choose where you want to do it, right? You can also do it on Reddit, like r/product, done, right? Just have a place for your community to reside, right? And start interacting with them. So I'll give you an example. In my current company, right? Unleash, it was an open source project, right? It was founded in 2014 as a side project, right? For the founder to be, using it on his own. And soon people started joining in. They started to, bring out issues on GitHub. right? And we're like, you know what, if you don't have time during the week or during the weekend, we'll contribute. We'll go ahead and review this, we'll add features and start doing it. So that was a peer-to-peer community, right? And when the founder decided to make it a real company, right, back in 2020 January, it became it became this whole company, but the community still existed, right? There were already what 3,000 something stars on GitHub, right? And there were issues, there were already contributors, there were SDKs from contributors, right? And the process started to come about, that how do we formalize this? They did not get to it. Again, early stage startup, so product funland, right? So they focused on the product, and when I got onboarded about 2 months ago, I saw that okay, this is a very healthy community, right? From the start, it's amazing. There's a lot of activity, there's a lot of engagement, right? But how to formalize this? You can call it a community, but how do you capitalize on it? How do you make processes? How do you make a community life cycle that this is where somebody enters? So that's my part, that's my part as a community manager to formalize the process. But again, the community still existed. It's only based on interactions, and they've managed to grow it so far where we already had about 6,000 stars on GitHub, right? And 10,000 people in the community, quite active, right? And all of it without a community manager. So I don't think it's a matter of, how do I start? Where do I start? What do I do right? You don't even need a community lifecycle in the first place. You can just go ahead and start interacting with your users. Just say, this is the place where we're talking to you, right? If somebody's passionate enough, if somebody wants to get involved, they will join, right? And start talking to them, understand what their needs are, right? Where do they find a roadblock? Be a support channel, be a listener, right? And say, yes, I think this is correct. I think you are correct. We need to fix this, or you know what, we need to fix our documentation, or maybe you can help us out there, or let's make some content together about this so that everybody knows that, okay, this is the problem and this is how you can solve it. So that's how the community grows. It's more, like I said, it's more one-on-one conversations than not. And not even early stage startups, I think anybody can start their own community. I started my community journey back in college, right? I did it for Mozilla, but during those times, I branched out when I was doing some design. So I started a design community called Karigar, more generalist community, just talking about design, just making content, right? Just just trying to find designers where I was, right? And hosting events and meeting new people, meeting new designers. So anybody can start a community. It's not a matter of how as well. It's how much are you willing to dedicate, to those users, to those people who are willing to dedicate time for you. Yeah, and I forgot the second question.
Yeah, I think it was more on a business side. I think you kind of give them how to get started. I think you kind of give a really good picture of both the questions, kind of a why a business should start and also the
All right.
how to get started.
Mhm.
And I think you put it in a really nice way. Don't look for some channel, like choose any platform which makes you comfortable. And it's
Right.
about listening to them and start kind of helping them out and listening to them. How can you make their life better? And also,
Yeah,
it's not one way, it's a two-way collaboration. And
exactly.
see how you can welcoming them, how you can support them, so that way
Yeah.
you can grow your community and increase the engagement. It's more the engagement is the key. Instead of just having a lot of numbers, start talking to them, one-on-one conversations. So the meaningful conversation, the meaningful engagement, which kind of gives you some more fruitful discussions. Yeah, that sounds really great. And we should not look for any kind of a debate of like, hey, I don't have a tool, I don't have a community manager. It's about get started and start talking to your members who are ready to help you or ready to collaborate with you on that.
Yeah,
Coming to that, I know
that's
that you,
why
yeah, you want to say
that's
something?
exactly that's exactly why I say that the original community manager in my company was the founder, the CTO. That you brought in so many users, and we've even hired from community before. right? Somebody in your community who's already seen the product, used the product, maybe contributing the product as well, right? And they might just be the perfect hire for you. So
Mhm.
you spend a lot of money, going through recruiters, HRs, headhunting, and whatever, trying to find the right developer. But if there's a talented engineer in your sites, you can also go through that.
Yeah, that's great.
So there's a lot more than you originally think of. But when it comes to you, you realize, okay, this is perfect. No effort.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that's another benefit of having a good community, and you don't need to look for a talent. You already have a pool of talent, which can potentially become your future employee. That's great. I think I know that you worked in the past on event strategy as well.
Mhm.
Can you tell us a little bit more on community and relation to events, why events are important, how somebody should approach events? Like as a SaaS company, what are the
Mhm.
events I should consider attending and why?
Mhm. Right. So first of all, why community and events? Because your community needs a place to go and be pampered. That's how I like to put it. But again, it's much more nuanced than that. You get to meet people and people meet people, which is more important. If your community is not engaging with it within itself, right, it becomes very supporty, right? Like it only exists as a support channel then because it's just you talking to them, right? So it's important for a community to come, meet together, right? Hang out, sort of a space. So that's why events are important there. I mean, I'm definitely talking about meetups or hackathons. The second is you get to make a lot of content, right? And you get to showcase that content and help developers. I mean, solely focus on developers, help developers build better because you can focus on releases, issues, or complex problems and showing 100 people on how to solve them. And the last one would be to pamper them, bring a lot of swag, feed them beer, wine, whatever you like, right? So that's the basics of community events. But when I talk about event strategy, there are obviously developer community events, right? I'm only talking about developer communities, by the way, and developer events. So there are developer community events, there are developer enterprise events, right? There are meetups, there are hackathons, right? And there are webinars. So when I go through event strategy, it's a very power-packed question actually. So when I go through event strategy, I often focus on what are the basics that we need to do. So for webinars and meetups, right, those have to be monthly, right? If you don't have the resources, you can go bi-monthly, but I suggest that you go monthly because that's a regular cadence where your community knows that, okay, every month we're meeting, right? Every month there's something going on. And that way you can build up a lot of confidence within the community, plus a lot of content for people who are not in your community to get involved. They might be hesitant to understand, okay, what is Unleashed doing, right? Well, we don't understand what the product is, but if they see, okay, there's a meetup, I'd be willing to, check it out maybe. So you have that cadence which helps you greatly, especially exponentially, because your first meetup might not get you a lot, but your 10th meetup will get you a lot of community members, a lot of content, a lot of reach, a lot of visibility. And people also start talking about it, So I was at the Google office last week, right? And sure, the Flutter meetup was great. There were some things that I did not like. So if I go ahead and talk about it with somebody, they'll be like, okay, maybe I should avoid the Flutter meetup next time, right? Or if I like something, they'll be like, you know what, I'll also come. Let me know when the next one happens. So people want to get involved, right? This is a great way to get them involved regularly. Now, coming to hackathons, hackathons are really important for you to gather product feedback, right? Mostly around adoption, because when you see somebody trying through, you can see it live that, okay, there were 2,000 participants in a hackathon, right? Out of which only 200 tried to create something with Unleash, right? But out of which only 20 could actually build something with Unleash, and the rest 180 were asking questions, right, around things. So on what level, right, do your docs fail? Or on what level do your content fail? On what level does your product fail, where your user cannot understand that, okay, this is the journey we have to go through. And that's a great way to realize that, because while you have senior developers, while you have senior software engineers, whatever, anybody who's senior, they try to push their way through, they find the answer, and they get it done because they understand enough about the product. But somebody who's more junior, who is still participating in hackathons, might not understand that. And you need to be foolproof. If your documentation is foolproof, your adoption won't stop, because it's easier to onboard your product, right? So hackathons help out with that in a big way, plus visibility. So that's the idea behind hackathons. Plus, you get to send out a lot of swag, which is great. If I'm talking about student hackathons, they love swag. So always send swag. Like, yeah, it's great. Coming to developer community events, conferences, right? Developer community conferences, I would say that you start with what kind of budget you have, because with developer communities, it can range like a lot. You can start from what, $3,000 to $50,000 in a heartbeat, right? And that's not the end of it. So with developer community events, you sure want some visibility, you want some reach, but the strategy there is to get in touch with developers and really talk about it, right? Go
Makes
ahead
sense.
and go ahead and talk about your product. That's the most important thing in the world. Sure, you'll be giving out swags, right? That's fine. But you want to pitch the idea, you want to pitch your philosophy to the developers, because these are opinionated developers who come to conferences to either listen to experienced developers, right? Talk themselves, right? Meet experienced developers, or or simply to have fun, right? And either way, your philosophy, if it does not create enough conflict in their heads, it's not good enough, right? It has to be a talking point. So you approach developer community events through this, and you go for CFPs, of course, call for papers. You try to submit a talk, right? For which uh I like to add suspense to the talk, which works really well, right? Always add suspense to your talks. If you're going through booths, sure, set up your booth in a more raw way, right? Because I felt that a very polished booth does not really get that much respect, right? But if you're very startup-y, it's perfect. I've seen companies just handing out t-shirts as well, like, here you go, here you go. This is what the product is. But that's very that's the anti-conference approach. That's the anti-community approach, because you're not having a discussion, right? So the idea is to be raw, but have a lot of discussions. That's the point. Maybe show them a demo. Maybe, be ready to show them a demo, because of course, they're developers. They would love to learn about a new product, and always say that you might be wrong, right? Because if you challenge them, it's good, it's great, but again, developers don't like to be wrong, of course. Right? I was watching this community event happening in the US, and there was a company which simply wrote DevOps is dead, right? And they're really into platform engineering and everything, which is fine, but that became a huge talking point on Twitter. And that took away a lot of visibility from the company itself, because people kept on talking about the person who was at the event, right? And omitted the name of the company altogether, right? So sure, you can have edgy opinions. You're open to do that, but always try to understand the problem, because that's where community comes in. Like we mentioned, like, it's a two-way street. It can't be you just throwing down information at them, right? Yeah, that should be your booth strategy. Again, swag is great. You should invite your community members. In an ideal world, If I'm say hosting a booth in Amsterdam, I would ask my community, you know what, are there two of you, any two of you who's in Amsterdam available for a conference? I'd be happy to, have you there at the booth talking about Unleash any day, right? Because if your community members are talking about your product, there's no better way, right? I've done it for Mozilla Firefox, right? I was back in college. I still use Firefox, right? And I did not just refer, I fought for the product because, people were like, the other browsers do this. I'm like, you know what? This is what it can do. So why not this? And I've definitely converted a ton of users into Firefox, right? They don't do regular marketing. It's a completely community voluntary effort for them. So like I said, booths are great. Whatever. Sure, market the event on social media that hey, we'll be there so that the people can come and pick out time to talk to you, right? Of course. Yeah, I guess that's about it for community events. For enterprise events where you are looking for leads, I like to go with a split of 50% community people and 50% content people, sorry, sales people, because your community people can help you onboard a user towards sales, right? It's enterprise conferences are not effectively trade shows, but the developer enterprise conferences are more about exploration for a lot of users, right? For a lot of participants. So it's important to give out the right messaging. That's where you need a polished booth, right? That's where you need a lot of swag. I think swag works either way. I also like to have a coffee machine, right? Because if somebody comes to have a coffee, right, they have a coffee in their hand, they will come and talk. It's very natural. Or have a beer bar sort of thing, a small beer bar where you just open and give them a beer, of course, sponsored by you. So obviously it's not an obligation. Never make it feel like it's an obligation. Just try and have a conversation and understand what they do, how could they use it, how your product fits in their stack. And with enterprise conferences, there are companies which go all in. And you know, so I've seen Mercedes Benz booths which are like two floored, like with stairs, and they have cars down there with the lounge area and everything. Sure, you can go ahead and invest €500,000 on that, but on the other end of it, if you're just investing, say, €5,000 for a really small booth, like the size of a desk, even that's fine. People will still come and talk to you, right? You just need to figure out who works for you in the event setting, right? Like which persona, which person. Like if I'm the one, you know, the best person to bring in more leads or not, right? That's why a 50-50 split helps, right? Because you get to realize, okay, who brought in more leads, and then you can focus on sort of narrowing it down. And yeah, you can go ahead and make flashy statements and make flashy booths, but I definitely suggest you start small and make it big.
That's great. How do you differentiate between the online events and offline events? Do you have kind of some recommendations like for the community to reach more audience, doing more online
Yeah.
events? Because there are a lot of online events, the engagement might be not as physical events. Any thoughts on that?
In terms of organizing or
Yeah, like do you recommend
attending?
more? Do you have experience doing online events where worked really well and
So we were doing a webinar today, and yeah, it's over 500 users. It's our first ever webinar,
Mhm.
and we have over 500 attendees who RSVP. Let's see how many come in. We've been trying our best to market the hell out of it, but let's see how that goes. But yeah, on the other end of it, I've done conferences as well. So I organized the GraphQL back in 2021, and that had about 5,600, yeah, over 5,600 participants. First conference ever for GraphCMS for me. And I mean, not for me. I was involved in Mozilla Festival before, but yeah, it was a standalone conference where I was the only community and events manager. So did it all from scratch. But yeah, making it a success, marketing it well, it was really important, right? So what what I like to focus on when marketing a conference or when marketing events is reach out to users one on one, right? Have a marketing template, of course, right? But if there's a community user that who has interacted within your community sphere before, you go ahead and invite them. If I'm talking about companies, invite your customers, right? Your customers will be keen to get involved because it's a webinar of a product that they use. So even if they themselves are not going in, they will ask somebody else in the company that, hey, you know what, you use this product really often, so maybe it might be helpful for you. And social media is fine, but social media is a bit, how do I put it, a bit of a shot in the dark because you don't often reach the audience you intend to, but you have to craft the event in a way where your platforms are sorted, and definitely make use of your platforms when you're going for online events. So I like to use StreamYard or Restream, right, to actually stream the events because that gives me the flexibility to bring in comments from multiple sources, right? And I like to stream it on YouTube and LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn because the event stays on LinkedIn, right? It becomes a piece of content that gets recommended to everyone. And at the same time, if you have an event on your company page on LinkedIn, an algorithm works in a way that it is an event more of an engagement standpoint than a post. So it will get recommended to you
Mhm.
regardless, right? So you get more impressions, you get more reach. If nothing else, you will have your logo in front of thousands of people in no time. So yeah. And make sure to tag a lot of people, of course. And for YouTube, right? When you finish the recording on YouTube, you definitely have the recording, right? As a piece of content on YouTube, right? So if you're going for a monthly cadence, perfect. Go for a monthly cadence. Have those events ready on YouTube, on LinkedIn, right? And start sending it to more users. And once they start reacting to it, once they start RSVPing it, LinkedIn algorithm will treat it like, okay, I've RSVP'd, so maybe you're interested in the event as well if you're my friend. So it will show you around. So it's important to focus on network effects when you're marketing online, when you're doing events online. And I suggest you, like, sure, apart from the regular, okay, you have to have a social media post, you have to have your writings, you have to market it here. Like, apart from everything, you have to focus on network effects and how you can bring about those network effects into place. And you'll get a lot of participation. And of course, content is key. If you have the right content, yeah, it's going to be successful.
That's great. Pranshu, you shared tons of really interesting content insights. Where can people find you on social media?
Sure. So on Twitter, you can find me on In My Prawn Shoes, In My Prawn Shoes, like shoes, and
I'm going to share the
it's
link
difficult.
in my podcast. I'm going to share the
Perfect,
link.
perfect. And yeah, you can find me on Twitter or LinkedIn. I think that's the two standard places. That's where I live half of the
Okay,
time.
that's great. Thank you very much for taking time today, and I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you very much, Pranshu.
Thank you so much, Anil. Likewise.